Boxing philosophy is about understanding. How does Holyfield land his left hook? How does Canelo land his left hook to the body? Who owns the best jab in boxing, and why? These questions open doors. They push us to explore the different elements of the sport, the punches, the timing, the rhythm. But also there are less visible layers, glove size, contracts, psychology, and the unique environment each trainer builds. What truly makes a great trainer? Is it the strategy they design or the culture they create in the gym? Boxing philosophy is about asking sharp questions, even when there are no clear answers. Because in the search for answers, understanding grows. Is Anthony Joshua finished at the top level? Carl Frosch claims he is done. But is that really the truth? Joshua's position is complicated. The Daniel Dubois fight raised harsh questions. Has his punch resistance slipped? Where was his jab? And can his defense still hold up? These flaws are real, but not impossible to correct. Joshua has rebuilt before. Heavyweight boxing can turn on a single night. In Britain, Joshua remains hugely respected. His popularity stretches far beyond boxing. He has made a massive cultural impact, and his brand power is unmatched. With alleged career earnings over $250 million, he no longer needs the money. What he must decide is whether legacy still drives him. For some, Tyson Fury owns the greater legacy. But if Joshua were to face and beat Fury, everything would change. That is the fight that could put him at a different table altogether. The table reserved for legends. Joshua has the physique, the experience and the platform. The question is whether the fire still burns. If it does, he could silence the doubters once again. Is Martin Bakole the dark horse of the heavyweight division? Against Anderson, he was vicious. The uppercuts were brutal. Every shot carried danger. He kept coming, strong and confident, breaking through Anderson's defense until it collapsed. It was one-sided, a night that could end a fighter's career. But then came Joseph Parker on 48 hours' notice. Bakole started well with his uppercuts and left hooks, but he walked into the right hand. His gas tank failed him. His defense betrayed him. In 2 rounds, the lesson was clear. At this level, mistakes are punished. Parker had experience. Bakole did not. Then came Ejagba. He had good moments in rounds 3 and 8, but many thought he lost. Critics pointed at his weight. The redemption was not achieved. So the questions remain. Is Bakole in condition? Is he truly passionate about the grind of training? We hear the sparring stories, the marketing, the hype, but sparring isn't fighting. To be a threat, Bakole must revive the version that destroyed Anderson, the vicious, intimidating handful no heavyweight wants. Why is Bivol silent? I feel like people have forgotten him. When he fought Canelo, he was the underdog, an unknown to casual fans, and even purists weren't sure how good he really was. He was a champion, but unproven at the elite level. Canelo took the challenge, and by round 3, things got real. Bivol responded with flurries, stood his ground, and showed he was a warrior willing to take risks. His jab was dominant, his performance outstanding, yet people still slept on him. Against Beterbiev, the first fight was close, but in the rematch from round 6, Bivol entered Matrix mode, leaving Beterbiev and the fans astounded. That was brilliance. Now he's silent because he's recovering from back surgery, with no return until 2026. By then, at 34, who knows how many fights remain? I just hope he gets big money fights. Boxers have a short window to secure financial stability, and Bivol deserves it. Before he leaves, I want to see him go back into that Matrix mode. Canelo. What's next on his journey? Canelo Alvarez has achieved almost everything in boxing. His career earnings exceed $600 million, but his legacy is defined by unforgettable performances. The rematch victory over Gennady Golovkin cemented him as a modern great. Golovkin was feared, yet Canelo stood firm and delivered a career-defining display. Against Miguel Cotto, he proved himself an elite fighter in a tactical battle with a master. And his demolition of Billy Joe Saunders, punctuated by a destructive left hook, showed his frightening power and sent a clear warning to anyone daring to trade with him. The question now is motivation. Fighters begin hungry for success and legacy. But with millions earned, does Canelo still carry the same fire? His elbow injury also raises concerns. Could it weaken his technique and expose new vulnerabilities? Add the psychological weight of a loss to Terence Crawford, and opponents may approach him with greater confidence. Still, the future offers huge opportunities. A showdown with David Benavidez would be a brutal, fan-thrilling war. A rematch with Dmitry Bivol, who toppled Beterbiev, could further elevate his legacy. Anthony Joshua's future at the top divides opinion. Carl Froch says he's done, but Joshua's legacy isn't sealed yet. Doubts linger over his punch resistance, jab, and defense, yet these flaws are fixable. Wealth secured, what remains is legacy. A Tyson Fury showdown could redefine him. Heavyweight boxing changes in a single night. If Joshua finds his fire again, he could silence doubters and claim a seat at the legend's table.
So is Anthony Joshua done at top level? Because Carl Froch has expressed that Anthony Joshua is done. Is this likely the truth, or could Joshua operate back at the top? Furthermore, could he win back a title and further develop his legacy? But what about the Daniel Dubois fight? That fight clearly raised some questions. Some of those questions are, has the punch resistance, has it disappeared? Has it gone? Where was the Anthony Joshua jab that used to be so prominent? And can Joshua make amendments to his defensive duties? All of these questions are suitable questions. But can he rectify this? Can he take it to a new level? But before we make those assertions, let's clarify something. And that is, Anthony Joshua has had a fantastic career. He's had a great career. In Britain alone, he is so popular and he has huge respect. And he has made a massive cultural impact. Yes, he has made a massive cultural impact. Joshua has built such an amazing brand. He really has. And in boxing, there is this short window. It's a short window to make money. But Joshua, I believe, he could still make money, even outside of boxing. And this is primarily due to the brand that he has built and the credibility that he has. And that says something. That says something about him, and it says something about his career. And think of this. The alleged $250 million in earnings from boxing means he's probably not doing this comeback for the money. The money isn't the primary objective. Remember, we are all built differently. We are all built differently. Most of us, we dream. We dream about being wealthy. But to some people, legacy becomes more important. It becomes more important than money when the money goals have been achieved. And that's a huge thing, because even though Joshua has had an amazing career, and he's made so much money, some boxing purists, or some would say most boxing purists, would consider Tyson Fury has the greater boxing legacy. Of course, this can be disputed. But could Joshua change that perception? Could he change that perception if he fights and then beats Tyson Fury? Of course, this is a massive ask. But in reality, there is so much to gain. And again, there is not just money on the table, there is legacy on the table. I repeat, there is not just money on the table, there is legacy on the table. In fact, it's a different table, and that table is reserved for a very few, or I should say reserved for only a significant few. Anthony Joshua's position at the top level, in one sense, it's complex. I mean, Carl Froch says Joshua is done. Some may view that position to be harsh. But of course the doubts remain. Of course, after what happened against Daniel Dubois, the doubts remain. And of course, the punch resistance is in question. I have myself saying, what happened to the jab, once a very trusted weapon? And it seems to have dissipated. And like we've said, defensively, there seems to be that there may be some weaknesses. But there's an important premise here. These are not impossible to fix. They really aren't. Many fighters have rebuilt their careers with the correct adjustments. Many fighters have rebuilt their careers with the correct adjustments. Joshua has the discipline, and he has the resources to do the same. It's important to remember that one bad night doesn't define a career. One bad night doesn't define a career. Joshua's record, it's decorated. His impact is huge worldwide, particularly in Britain. And Joshua still has the physique, he still has the experience, the boxing experience, and the platform to compete at the top. And legacy fights, especially that Tyson Fury fight, could change the story. It could be a new significant chapter in a story that has many great chapters. But Joshua must now choose whether to chase greatness again. Does he have the ambition to do this? He has the wealth, he has the fame, he has the respect. But further legacy, that requires risk. Perhaps, theoretically, if he can bring back his jab, sharpen his defense, maybe he could shock the doubters. Again, it's the right adjustments. He has been written off before. Think of the Andy Ruiz situation. And he has returned stronger before. And it's important to remember this. Heavyweight boxing is unpredictable. That's why we love it. Everything can change literally from a single punch. One fight can change everything. And for Joshua, maybe it comes down to fire and hunger. Beating Fury or reclaiming a title would lift him onto another table. And as I've stated, that table is reserved for legends. Very few people sit at that table. And it is where fighters are remembered for generations. And it looks like to me that Joshua has the ambition and the passion to sit at that table. Because it would appear that he's not fighting for money. He's fighting for legacy, or to further develop his legacy. And with his ability, and with his resources, and with his passion, This could get very interesting. Martin Bakole might be the heavyweight division's dark horse. Against Jared Anderson, he was a monster. Relentless pressure, brutal uppercuts, and frightening power that broke through defenses with ease. Yet inconsistency shadows him, and against Parker, poor conditioning cost him, and against Ajagba, doubts lingered. So the question is, does Bakole have the discipline to match his danger? Because when focused, he's a nightmare for anyone. You know what? I'm worried about Martin Bakole. Now, against Anderson, he was vicious, really vicious. Those uppercuts, they were something else. They really were. He was menacing. And he may have destroyed Anderson's career, or at least destroyed his confidence for a significant period of time. He was intimidating, punching with authority. And he kind of reminded me, don't laugh, of a cross between Riddick Bowe and George Foreman on that night. Bakole on that night carried real danger. Every shot looked absolutely damaging, and the pressure was constant. Anderson couldn't slow him down. I wouldn't say he looked overwhelmed. He kept his composure, but the nature of the punches just simply overwhelmed him physically. And Bakole kept coming. He looked strong, menacing, and confident. He looked strong, menacing, and confident. He took control of the ring. And it's like he fought like a giant with bad intentions. And in that fight, he looked like a giant as well. Anderson's defense, he's like a slick boxer, but it just couldn't cope with the power as the punches broke through. It was brutal, and it developed into being one-sided. It made me realize that a fighter can lose everything in a night like that, and I don't think Anderson has been the same since. But then he fought Joe Parker, amazingly on 48 hours' notice. It was a brave move, It was a brave move. Let's give him a tick for that, because Martin Bakole rolled the dice. He rolled the dice, and you have to respect it. And in round one, his uppercuts and that left hook to the head and left hook to the body, it looked really impressive. It really did. But then in the second round, he walked into the right hand, meticulous punch by Joseph Parker. And he clearly did not have the condition, or he didn't look like he had the conditioning. And I feel like there was a lesson here. And the lesson is always be ready, because opportunity can come at any time. Anytime. We don't always control when the opportunity comes. Bakole, unfortunately, was ready to take the risk, but he was not ready for the war. Let me repeat that. Bakole was ready to take the risk, but he was not ready for the war. That was the difference. And the fight was short, but it still told a significant story. Parker, in fairness to Parker, he stayed calm under the fire. He stayed calm. He saw openings, and he timed his shot. He was looking for that shot from round one. Bakole showed courage. He got up, but his body betrayed him. He was not ready. His gas tank betrayed him. His defense betrayed him. 2 rounds exposed maybe not the truth, but a truth. At this level, at the elite level, small mistakes are punished. Parker has been in deep waters before. Bakole has been in the waters, but he hasn't been in the same deep waters that Parker has been in. And I guess one of the stories here is that experience matters, and conditioning matters, and having the heart to take the risk is not enough. Heart is not enough. War, going to war, giving it all, giving your all, it needs preparation, and war needs sacrifice. And that sacrifice is the training. It's the training camp. It's being harnessed in that boxing environment. And in 2 rounds, Bakole learnt a very harsh lesson. But the short delay was a good justification for the loss. I mean, he only had 48 hours or maybe less. So there was a justification. And then there was the fight with the Jugba. This was supposed to be the redemption to get back into the picture, so to speak. And in round 3 and in round 8, Bakode looked really good. He was looking menacing. His uppercuts were making an impact, and he was throwing that left uppercut and that right hook to the top of the head. And again, in round 3 and in round 8, it made an impact. But if we look at all the rounds, many thought he lost the fight. And this was supposed to be the redemption. And we can say quite clinically that the redemption was not achieved, or the redemption was not achieved on that night. Additional to this, boxing critics, they criticized the weight. He came in heavy. And it made me think about a few things. It made me ask a few questions. Is Bakole in condition? Is he in boxing condition? Is he passionate about boxing? Is he passionate about training? The sad thing is that with the right preparation and with the right mindset, Bakole could be a real threat to the heavyweights. And I feel like in the past year, there's been a real focus on marketing Bakole. There's been a real focus on marketing him. We've all heard the sparring stories. Allegedly, I say allegedly, he's beaten up every elite heavyweight in sparring. He is the sparring king. There's a few problems here. Talking about sparring in the boxing world is seen as extremely distasteful. However, I understand that he's trying to raise his profile. He's trying to build his image. And good or great marketing is essential. But we need great training and we need great preparation. There needs to be a relationship between great marketing and great preparation. And in effect, we need to revive the Bakole that beat Anderson. Because that Bakole was a handful. That Bakole is vicious, intimidating, and a real challenge. So hopefully, that Bakole will be revived. So Frazer Clarke has a historic British title fight on the BBC. Frazer Clarke has a historic British title fight on the BBC. And this got me thinking. It got me thinking because the last time when I saw Frazer Clarke, he lost to Fabio Wardley, and it was concerning. It was very concerning. I thought to myself, how does a fighter recover from that psychologically? How do they recover from that psychologically? And it made me think, can Frazer Clarke make an effective comeback? And can he make an impact? Now, against Tete, a committed overhand right, it finished the job. What does this say? Well, it shows me that he is not afraid to commit to punches. He committed to that right hand. And that's a good thing, because think of this. Every time a boxer throws a punch, there is a greater risk. Every time a boxer throws a punch, there is a greater risk. And when a boxer suffers a knockout, this can affect him psychologically. It can really affect him psychologically. Why? Because a damaged fighter may not pull the trigger. When I say pull the trigger, I mean punches. Or they may not pull the trigger enough. So we need to analyze. Who is the opponent? Who is the opponent? And will this opponent pull the trigger? Will this opponent present a challenge, or will they present challenges? And what puzzles will need to be solved to be victorious? For Frazer Clarke to be victorious, what puzzles is he going to need to solve? So let's try and make it make sense. So enter the opponent, which is Jamie TKV. I think he's a good opponent. I really do. And this assessment of Jamie TVK being a good opponent is based on when he fought David Adeleye. In that fight, TVK against David Adeleye presented a puzzle, a constant lateral movement, a varying jab, and staying out of the pocket. Let me repeat. Constant lateral movement, a varying jab, and staying out of the pocket. Adeleye struggled with this puzzle. And the way he solved the puzzle, or the way Adeleye solved the puzzle, was a left hook in the clinch. It was actually relatively quite controversial, but it was a short, powerful shot. He didn't see it coming. But TVK showed something. He showed boxing intelligence. He showed a good jab. He showed patience. He showed composure. All of these things are important within boxing. And of course, there are some questions about TVK that we cannot ignore. What are those questions? Well, does he have a good chin? How hard does he punch? How good is his punch resistance? And we don't have a definitive answer. No, we don't. We don't have a definitive answer on his stamina. We don't know this. But to fight on the BBC, slight pivot here, to fight on the BBC is a massive opportunity. The British title, what is it? It's prestigious. I mean, its heritage dates back to 1909. It's rich in tradition. It's rich in tradition, and it's rich in career significance. Let me land this plane. Well, Lennox Lewis held the British title, and he, of course, was an amazing fighter. He was an amazing fighter that went on to be the undisputed heavyweight champion, and he had a great reign. And then we have Frank Bruno, and he held a British title. Indeed, he did, and then he went on to become heavyweight champion of the world. An amazing accomplishment. And of course, you got Joe Calzaghe, and he held the British title before his undisputed championship run. And what a run it was. And then, of course, you had Ricky Hatton. He won the British title, and he went on to become world champion. In Britain, it's part of the culture. It's almost like part of the tradition. So when we say the British title is important, that makes perfect sense. But now let's go back to Frazer Clarke. Now in boxing, as we all know, the jab is not just important, it's very important. And according to Box Stats, Frazer Clarke lands 5 to 6 jabs per round. I think this is essential because TVK is going to want to make this. He's going to want to make this a long-range boxing match. I think he would want to do that based on the Adeleye fight. So the battle of the jabs needs to be won, or at the very least contested. The battle of the jabs needs to be won, or at the very least it needs to be contested. But this is a good fight. This is a very good fight. And if Frazer Clarke wins, he wins that British title. And we also get further and further away against his loss to Fabio Wardley. So this would be a very positive move in the right direction if he was to be victorious.
Dmitry Bivol's silence isn't about fading away, it's the price of war. After conquering Canelo as the underdog and dismantling Beterbiev in Matrix mode, Bivol proved he's truly elite. Now sidelined by back surgery until 2026, the boxing world seems to have forgotten his brilliance. But when he returns at 34, the question is, will he secure the money fights and remind us why he left fans in awe?
So why is Bivol silent? I feel like people have forgotten about Bivol. I remember when Bivol fought Canelo. I really remember that. And in my recollection, Bivol was the underdog and he was an unknown commodity. He was an unknown commodity to the casual boxing fan. And in truth, even the boxing purist at the time, that's the important caveat, did not know how good he was. We knew who he was, but we didn't know how good he was. At this time, we didn't know. We didn't know that Bivol was an elite boxer. At this time, we did not know that Bivol was an elite boxer. I mean, we knew he was good. We knew he was good. We knew he was a championship level boxer. But let's be honest, we did not know that he was elite level, because there's like championship level and then there's elite level. And Canelo, to his credit, he took the challenge. He is a warrior. Bivol was a champion, but still, his quality, the quality of his brand had not been decided. We did not know that he was like the Bugatti of boxing. We didn't know he was like the Bugatti of boxing. We were soon to find out. And of course, in the boxing jungle, things get very, very real. And Canelo started to get super real in, I think it was round 3. But you know what? Bivol responded. He responded with flurries of punches. In that moment, Bivol made a decision. He stood up to Canelo, and he was not going to back down. And for me in that fight, Bivol's jab, it was dominant, but he was also physical. Yes, I understand he did box most of the time, but at other times he stood his ground. To me, Bivol showed that he was a warrior. Canelo was a warrior as well. But Bivol showed that he was a warrior that would take a risk. Bivol showed that he was a warrior that would take a risk because in simple terms, the performance was outstanding. But it seems to me that we're still sleeping. We're still sleeping on Bivol. If my memory serves me correctly, when he fought Beterbiev, and what a fighter he is. But when he fought Beterbiev was the favorite. To be honest, that's understandable considering his reign. And when we look at that first fight, it was closely contested. And additionally to that, it was an amazing event. But the second fight, and I think it was for me the round 5 or round 6, I can't exactly remember, but Bivol entered the Matrix mode. Bivol entered the Matrix mode. To put it figuratively, he left planet Earth, left Beterbiev, and he left boxing fans and probably casual fans astounded. He left them absolutely flabbergasted. It was an incredible performance. And at the time of writing, Bivol is recovering from back surgery. Well, that's what's being reported. I guess this is the casualties of war. This means, well, what does it mean? It means that there's no future fights that are scheduled, and he will probably not fight. He probably won't fight in 2025. He'll probably fight in 2026. But let's not forget the brilliance of this man. Let's not forget the brilliance of his boxing mind. When I look back, I feel like, and I recognized it at the time, I was in awe of that performance. And I actually became a Bivol fan after 3 rounds against Canelo. That's when I became a fan. But after the Beterbiev fights, I realized that Bivol is truly elite. And that's a rare group. So why is Bivol silent? Well, in simple terms, that's probably because of the injury. But more importantly, why is the boxing public silent? Why are we not talking about Bivol's brilliance and remembering the impact of that fight. Personally, I'm a strong believer. Don't just talk about boxers when they're in the limelight. Don't just talk about them when they're in the limelight. So considering this, who will Bivol fight when returning in 2026? He is now, I believe, currently at the age of 34 years old, which means it's hard to tell how many fights he will engage in. How many fights will he have left? Personally, I hope he gets some big money fights. It's always important for boxers to make enough to be financially stable, or for any athlete to make enough to be financially stable. In short, boxers have a very small window of opportunity to make a lot of money. Therefore, it's important to maximize that opportunity. It's so important as a boxer to understand and maximize that opportunity. And I want to say this, if you don't want a boxer to make a lot of money, then please make it make sense. I mean, people love to tell the story of the boxer being broke. People love to tell that story. But then it appears they get envious when they maximize their economic opportunities. And let's be honest, that is what we should call nasty work. That's nasty work. Anyway, hopefully those money fights, or those big money fights, will equal to big competition. Because before Bivol leaves boxing, I want to see him go back to the Matrix mode. I really want to see him go back to the Matrix mode. And I think only the big competition can make him go back to the Matrix mode. So what are the facts concerning Jake Paul versus Tank? So to me, there are four. There are four important things to remember with regards to this fight. Number one, the fight is going to be a catch weight at 88 kg. That's significant. Number two, this is going to be 10 rounds, 3 minutes each. Number three, there will be 12-ounce gloves. And number four, it's an exhibition. To me, the 12-ounce gloves is a standout. Let me explain why. Because in lower weight fights, boxers typically wear 8 to 10-ounce gloves. In lower weight fights, boxers typically wear 8 to 10-ounce gloves. So 12-ounce gloves will, in theory, reduce the impact of the punches. They will reduce the impact. Now, Tank is considered a power puncher. However, there is a big caveat, and that caveat is that he is a power puncher at the lighter weights. Considering this, will his power translate at a higher weight? Will his power translate at a higher weight? Because say what you want about Jake Paul, but he's taken punches from heavier fighters. So the power of Tank may not be such a disparity, which is interesting. And here is a controversial statement. How will Tank manage Jake Paul's power? If we frame Jake Paul as just a YouTuber, then this is not even a question to answer. But I would argue that this narrative bias is a problem and is partly untrue. Jake Paul is, of course, a YouTuber, a very successful one, but he is also a person that has invested a lot of time. He's invested a lot of time and effort into boxing. He clearly is taking this seriously. Additional to that, he also has the money to pay for an elite boxing team. Considering this, dismissing Jake Paul, dismissing him may be a mistake. And then there is another question. If this is just an exhibition, will they try to knock each other out? Will they be in battle mode, or is this just purely entertainment? In other words, will Tank come to seek and destroy? He is a power puncher after all, a great counter puncher, or will we see a relaxed Tank? And then there's other questions like, who is taking the risks here? Who is taking the risks in this fight? When I evaluate fights, I often have a sequence of questions, and these sequence of questions reveal interesting answers. So you could ask the question, does the fight have economic value? Does it have significant economic value? Are there titles to gain? And who has more to lose? Who has more to lose? That's such a significant question. So let's look at this context. Let's make it make sense. With regards to economic gain, both fighters will prosper handsomely. With regards to economic gain, both fighters will prosper handsomely. With regards to the second question, well, there are no titles on the line. This is purely an exhibition. But with regards to the third question, this is the most revealing, because surely Tank has more to lose. Just imagine, and it may be hard for many to imagine, but imagine if Tank was beaten in the exhibition. Just imagine if he was stunned, dropped, or knocked out. This would not only affect the credibility of Tank, it would affect the credibility of boxing. Or would it affect the credibility of boxing? But it definitely would be something that many of us would not want to engage in. And from my perspective, what does matter is the integrity of boxing. And hopefully, with this event, or just in general, that is preserved accordingly. But let's remember that Tank is a world champion, and many regard him as an elite boxer. Sir James DeGale wins in his bare knuckle contest, but was it any good? Now, James DeGale was a gold medalist and he was a world champion. He was talented. He was very talented. And I personally remember his battle with Badou Jack. And I also remember his rivalry with George Groves. But now we're in like a bit of a weird situation. Because James DeGale has just participated in bare knuckle. It got me thinking, what's the motivation? Is it for the money? Is it for the thirst of the challenge? Or is it a combination of both? And when I thought about it, I have a controversial opinion. Because I think that boxing and bare knuckle fighting are actually very different. Let me explain, let me give some context. A great boxer may not be a great bare knuckle fighter, and a great bare knuckle fighter may not be a great boxer. Let me land the plane. Think about it. Bare knuckles, what happens? You're more prone to getting hand injuries. Therefore, boxers that were prone to hand injuries would struggle even more in bare knuckle. But there's more. In boxing, you use blocking a lot. Think of Floyd Mayweather, one of the greatest defensive fighters of all time. And you can do this because of the gloves, but in bare knuckle, there is more of a focus on foot movement and head movement. In bare knuckle, you are also more prone to getting cuts, and some really nasty cuts. And additional to this, in bare knuckle, throwing a hook is dangerous. Why? Why is it dangerous? Because you are more likely to break your hands. To give a simple analogy, bare knuckle and boxing, it's a different science. So how did James DeGale fare in his bare knuckle fight? He won the fight officially, and in fairness, he did face some adversity. He faced some adversity. His opponent threw headbutts. There was one in round one, the end of round one. Low blows, and I think there was a chokehold in there. He really tried to turn it into an ugly fight. His opponent was also trying to use the clinch for dirty boxing, which is what you should do. So what did James DeGale do well? What did he do well? Did he do anything well? Well, the first thing he did well is that he did maintain his composure. His experience as a former world champion gave him composure, and that helped because he needed it. Also, I think he did a good job of nullifying the inside work in the clinch. He clearly worked on that. DeGale used a lot of feints from the southpaw stance, and he did advance intelligently. He was trying the backhand off the jab feint, which is the right idea, and occasionally he turned the jab feint into a right hook. DeGale started to develop his offense more in round 4, and he tried to claim a more dominant position in the center of the ring. But despite this, there were some negatives in this performance. There definitely were some negatives in this performance. First of all, James DeGale seemed very easy to hit. But this wasn't the main issue. The main issue was his timing and his accuracy. And this affected his offense, particularly at the beginning. It's almost like he knew what to do, but he just couldn't do it, or he couldn't do the offensive part of it. And ring rust or bare knuckle rust should be expected. And after all, James DeGale has not been doing any official fighting for a considerable amount of time. So considering this, where does James DeGale go from here? I think this all depends on his motivations. If this is just a challenge, well, he can walk away knowing he put himself in a risky environment, a very risky environment. But if it's about money, then I feel like he needs to develop his bare knuckle resume, because I think a lot of people have been very critical of this performance. Additional to this, he needs to improve his timing to make a proper transformation into this form of fighting, because it's a different type of science. And this again got me thinking, how much do bare knuckle fighters get paid? We know that boxers potentially can get paid a lot of money, but how much do bare knuckle fighters get paid? And how much did James DeGale get paid? Well, unfortunately, James DeGale's purse was not, has not been released, but according to some figures I saw, entry-level fighters can get $2,500 to $10,000. Mid-level contenders can get $10,000 to $40,000, and champions or stars can get anything from $50,000 to $100,000. And top draws, whether ex-UFC or boxing names, sometimes could get $200,000 or $500,000, depending on the pay-per-view bonus. So I'm assuming that means that wouldn't be their initial payment, but they could reach that ceiling if the pay-per-view does well. Let's assume, I don't think it was pay-per-view, that fight, but assuming that DeGale got anything from 50 grand to 100 grand, this could be, from an economic perspective, a very lucrative option. But how long can he pursue this? Can he operate on the elite level of bare knuckle, or on a championship or contender level? Or will James DeGale engage in celebrity matches which would lower the difficulty level but create good economic opportunities? I guess only time will tell. So what happens when the relentless force of Rocky Marciano meets the tactical brilliance of Alexander Usyk? Marciano, the undefeated warrior with the crushing Suzy Q, thrived in brutal camps and overwhelmed foes with sheer power and attrition. Usyk, on the other hand, was the modern mastermind, blending footwork, feints, and ring IQ into a shifting puzzle opponents can't solve. Would Marciano's pressure break Usyk down, or would Usyk's precision and movement control the storm? This is a true fantasy clash of the eras. So let's talk about it. So what would happen if Usyk fought Rocky Marciano? Now, I think a lot of people, even boxing purists, they sleep on Rocky Marciano because he was a phenomenal fighter. I mean, he had 49 wins and no losses. He was a great puncher, truly a great puncher. And some consider him to be the most brave boxer that ever lived. And he had absolutely brutal training camps. And that's something that I initially did not know. And of course, what he's more popular for is the Suzy Q, which is the right hand that rendered most of his opponents unconscious. So Rocky Marciano was a great champion, but then we have Usyk, and some consider Usyk one of the most intelligent boxers of all time, one of the most intelligent boxers of all time. He has great defense, great footwork, great offense, and he has multiple gears. He can go to gear 1, to gear 2, to gear 3, to gear 4, to gear 5, etc. Usyk often goes to the matrix mode. He often goes to the matrix mode. So let's do a tactical breakdown of what might happen if these two fought. So let's first talk about Rocky Marciano's training. Marciano would isolate himself. He would isolate himself. There would be no women, no alcohol, no distractions. Exactly how a training camp should be. He stayed in remote locations, living clean, and in a way, living like a soldier, preparing for war. Marciano would actually train on a 300-pound bag. This is significant. And to give a comparison, most fighters at the time, I believe, would train with a 70-pound bag. So imagine that. Rocky Marciano uses a 300-pound bag, while most fighters at the time were using 70-pound bags. So this was an innovation because all his competitors were using lighter bags. And what did this do? This gave him an edge in power and an edge in conditioning. So Rocky Marciano's training was extreme. And the extreme level of his training makes me think that he was probably a genetic anomaly because his training was so intense. It was hardcore and it was intense. So now let's talk about Usyk. And Usyk has a camp that does all the boxing basics as you would expect, but he also does cognition drills such as the Schultz table. And the cognition drills are something that's new. He also does hand-to-eye coordination drills. So in a sense, Usyk's training camps, they're like a product of modern science. And I believe that Usyk has actually evolved boxing training. He's actually evolved boxing training. So in talking about this fight, let's talk about the jab battle. And to make this battle make sense, we need to ask, who would win the jab battle? Who would win it? And in boxing, the jab battle is crucial. It's so important. I remember when Lennox Lewis fought Frank Bruno, they had an absolutely intense and engaging jab battle. In a sense, jabs are defensive and offensive weapons. And you could argue that the jab and the feints are integral fundamental parts of boxing philosophy. It's always hard to beat a boxer that has a great jab. Larry Holmes instantly comes to mind. Now, when you look at the jab totals of both boxers, it's quite revealing. For example, Usyk throws 25 to 35 jabs per round on average. But hear this, Rocky Marciano allegedly only threw about 5 jabs per round. So to make a specific jab reference with regards to Usyk, when you look at the Anthony Joshua fight, the first fight, Usyk averaged 27 jabs per round, which meant a total of 296 jabs in the fight. But in the second fight, he averaged 24 jabs per round. So even on the lower end, on paper, Usyk would clearly dominate the jab battle. He would clearly dominate this battle as he throws and he lands more jabs. But what about if the fight took place in the pocket, or if it takes place on the inside? And the pocket or the inside fighting, this is where Rocky Marciano excels. This is his territory. And the numbers, they reveal that. So for example, if you look at Usyk, he has a balanced attack. So he has the jabs, but then he has like 25 power punches per round on average. Rocky Marciano, however, he averages 65 power punches per round. And of course, Rocky Marciano has that overwhelming style. So if the fight between Rocky Marciano and Usyk was in the pocket, Marciano has a tremendous advantage. A tremendous advantage as he throws 65 power punches versus 25. But there's a question. There's a question. Could Marciano make it that type of fight? Could he handle the movement, the jab, the precision and the accuracy of Usyk? That would be the question. Because yes, he would have the advantage in the pocket, but could he make the fight go to the pocket? So let's talk about the tactics of both men. Now, Rocky Marciano, contrary to popular belief, had boxing intelligence. He did. His unique strategy was that he would punch opponents' arms. And he would do this deliberately. And in doing this, it would have the following effect. Number one, his opponent's arms would get heavier as they would absorb the punching. Number two, this would lessen their punching output. So imagine someone punching your left bicep or punching your left arm. This could affect the output of your jab. Number three, this would increase the chances of landing punches to the head because now your opponent is forced to lower his guard or put his hands right down because he's in such pain. So this punching the arms was a very effective and intentional tactic by Rocky Marciano. But Usyk has elite boxing intelligence. He takes away his opponent's strengths. Against Joshua, Usyk won the jab battle. Then he increased the punch volume later in the fight. And when he fought Dubois, in the rematch particularly, he used his left hand counter effectively while nullifying his jab and nullifying his backhand. Against Tyson Fury, he used feints and pressure to outpoint a very skilled elite boxer. Very impressive. Usyk adapts. He analyzes the puzzle. He downloads the data and he solves it. And he solves it every single time at the time of writing. So who would win? A Usyk victory would consist of 35 jabs around, plenty of movement, and neglecting exchanges in the pocket. That would be a Usyk victory. This would be a 12-round unanimous decision. But a Rocky Marciano victory would consist of cutting off the ring, punching the arms ferociously, and then creating that opportunity to land with that Suzy Q. But there are other possibilities, or there is another possibility. And that other possibility is that Usyk wins the first half of the fight with the jab, movement, and boxing intelligence, but then gets drawn into exchanges in the second half of the fight. This is the more interesting scenario, and various things could happen from here. The first scenario is that Usyk wins a decision in a brutal war. Alternatively, Usyk could win on cuts. Rocky Marciano would cut very often. But then there's another scenario where Rocky Marciano wins by a knockout, coming from behind. And this was typical. Rocky Marciano would never give up. And some of his knockouts were coming from behind. Now, because both fighters have never lost, it's hard to envision either of them losing. But there is a scenario for victories on both sides. The one thing I can say is this would be such an intriguing fight. How would Usyk deal with the Suzy Q? How would he deal with the ferocious attack to the arms? How would he deal with that? How would he deal with a scenario where Marciano gets him in the pocket? But could Marciano get Usyk in the pocket? And how would Marciano deal with the southpaw jab? How would he deal with the southpaw stance, the punches coming from different angles? It's such an intriguing fight. And ultimately, there's a scenario where it could have become a really, really great fight.